Hello. I've had an idea for a couple months now, and I am ready to do it. So basically, I've been thinking a lot about Billie Eilish. I think a lot of us maybe have, but sort of in light of the documentary that she released somewhat recently. So I watched it a couple of times and have been sort of opening up her chart and thinking about her life and her chart and sort of how those two things are weaving together. Um, I know she's only 19, so there's a lot left to kind of come up, but I saw a lot when I was thinking about her chart in relation to her documentary and how much of her life that she shared there. So that's the plan for today. I am going to share my screen. Quick disclaimer before I do that. This is not necessarily a reading because when I do readings, they're very conversational and sort of focused on what is coming up for the person, rather than just like retroactively reflecting on their life and how it fits in their chart. So a little bit different than a normal reading, but I'm really excited about this. I hope it's exciting for you too. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share her screen. I mean, my screen with her chart. Okay, here's Billie Eilish's chart. I'm going to get started sort of with what we would usually start with, which is type. So there's four types in human design, and Billie is a generator. And generators are really focused on, or sort of here for expression. They're here to kind of like explore who they are, and they're here to use this energy source that they have to create things, to build things, to express, and to do things that make them feel lit up. And so thinking about Billie as an artist, she really is sort of like harnessing that energy to bring into music. So starting with that, I'm going to kind of go start with that and kind of start breaking things down from there. Some of this is going to get really specific, which I think is very fun, but I'll start with some of the basics to, yeah. Aside from being a generator, Billie is an emotional generator. So she's a generator because she has this pink one. This is the sacral center defined. I say emotional generator because her authority is emotional. This is the solar plexus right here. Emotional authority is sort of all about having these consistent waves of emotions that we're sort of always riding this up and down. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, it can feel like this strong sense of everything is awful and there's no reason for it. And she actually, in some of her interviews, she actually talks about this pretty explicitly, very openly, that she experiences periods of time where everything feels like it's falling apart, like it's crumbling, like it's horrible, like no one cares about her, like everything is pointless, and that there isn't necessarily a reason for it. And she was even in an interview speaking to this experience of people asking her what's wrong. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. That is very much the emotional wave that, again, defines solar plexus. And so when we talk about authority, it's sort of about not making decisions when you're in a high or a low, but sort of waiting for that neutral territory. But I do think her emotional authority and emotional wave is very present when we listen to her talk about her life and her experiences and her emotional environment internally, and all of that. If you see me looking down, I have some very messy notes that I took while watching the documentary the first time, and that's what I'm looking at down here. So aside from that, I also see a lot kind of looking, aside from just the generator, the sacral center here, and the defined solar plexus, looking right here at her, this is called the G center, also known as the identity center. And it's this source of direction, belonging, not necessarily, I mean, it's called the identity center, so it is speaking a lot about like someone's identity, but really focusing on like how does that identity fit into the whole? Where does someone belong? What does that mean about their direction? And so what I see here is that Billie has sort of like a consistent sense of direction, of love, of belonging, and that it's actually connected to her sacral center. And so that sort of sense of movement, creativity, expression, creation is connected to her sense of identity and love and belonging. And I think that that's very much in her documentary life as well. Another thing that sort of stands out to me, especially when we're thinking about someone who's a singer, a public figure, someone who speaks a lot in public settings, is looking up here at her undefined throat. And so when we think about someone with an undefined throat, it doesn't mean, oh, well, they can't talk. It does not mean that at all. It doesn't mean that they necessarily aren't expressing themselves. What I see is that she has a lot of gates that are hanging. So you see she has like 16, and then the other half isn't filled in, 35, the other half isn't filled in, 12, the other half isn't filled in. That she's relying on other people, and I don't mean in a dependent way, but she's relying on her connections with other people to help her express things. And so I'm gonna just go for it and get kind of a little bit technical here. So gate 11, this is called the gate of ideas. And gate 56 is the gate of the storyteller. And so we can see here, and gate 11 is actually her conscious sun gate too. So it's a big part of her personality. This is sort of like a spot where ideas can be generated ad nauseum. Like it's sort of this ideas, and they're not necessarily need to be brought into life, but that she's constantly producing ideas. I also see this hanging gate 35 and hanging gate 12. That in both of these areas, she has this solar plexus defined, so defined emotional solar plexus, and that these emotions, this pain or hope or whatever it may be that she's experiencing, isn't making its way directly to the throat, unless she is in contact with someone else who helps her bring that energy up. I do have Finneas's chart pulled up here, but for those of you who don't know, Billie Eilish is not a solo artist. She works with her brother. They do all their music together. He creates a lot of the actual tracks, and they work on lyrics together and stuff like that. So, and if you watch the documentary, you see Billie doesn't always enjoy writing music. She finds it really hard sometimes. And looking at her chart, there is sort of this sense of frustration of, there's a lot to be expressed here. And it's not always easy for that to make its way to the throat. And so the question sort of becomes like, how is she doing this? Because she's doing it beautifully, right? Her music is really either a story that she is telling or like a deep expression of her own emotional world. And so I'm just gonna flip to a new chart now, which is Finneas's. Randy's here to say hello. And we can see that Finneas not only has a defined throat, he actually has the gate 36, which is going to complete this channel here. And he has the full channel 1222. And in both of those areas, I think I can see this sort of like support that Billie has, where some of that expression is making its way to the throat via her connection with Finneas and via their artistic partnership too. I wanted to talk a little bit about gate 12 specifically too, not because I think it's important to dig into every single gate, but because this is her conscious earth. It's again, those top 4, 11, 12, 46, 25 are all a big part of her personality. They're part of the incarnation cross. You don't need to know what that means. So gate 12. Gate 12 is all about emotions being expressed. It's all about, I have a note here somewhere. Yeah, so sort of this like expression of self energy, talking about, I think I have my notes mixed up, but that's okay. I don't know why I'm looking down. I know what this is. So gate 12 can also kind of be talking about just being able to express the self. And you can see it's in this full channel that Finneas has. Being able to take those big emotions and direct them into expression in some way. When we watch, or if you have watched this documentary, Billie talks a lot about how supportive her family was, you know, that her success and that her ability to kind of be an artist at this point is a result of the support that she had pretty consistently from her parents. My dog wants to go on the balcony, so just 1 second. Okay. So with all of that said, I kind of lost my train of thought when I let my dog out, but okay, back to my idea. I really think that when people have a defined solar plexus, there's pain associated with it. It's sort of being on this roller coaster of emotions that we didn't choose to be on. The wonderful part of this is that experiencing those different emotions and kind of being able to gain the depth that is provided by being in the depths, right? You gain more depth of understanding when you experience multiple depths of emotion. You're able to see things from different angles. You're able to understand things from different perspectives because you've been there, right? So that's the nice side of it. But back to my point, which is that it can be really painful. It's sort of this up and down. It feels like there's no reason and no rhyme or reason for it to be hurting so deeply, you know? And something that's very clear when you hear Billie talk about her family is that expression was heavily encouraged for their entire family. They even, I think she said they had a rule where her parents couldn't make her and her brother go to bed if they were creating music. They could stay up as late as they wanted to because they know that inspiration kind of comes at different times. And so something that Billie talks about a lot is that, oh, I got an email, didn't expect that. Something that Billie talks about a lot is that some of her lyrics are really dark, really heavy, you know, and she even had a conversation with her mom about a particular line that I think most people would interpret as kind of like suicidal ideation, that she's really talking about not wanting to be here, you know. And she speaks about this in the way of, I need to write music that says this because then I don't actually have to do it. And I can see so much of this like defined solar plexus, defined G center. Her throat's not defined, but when we look at her creative partnership with her brother, that they're really like taking all of the experiences from that defined solar plexus. And man, Finneas has a lot here. And bringing that to life, bringing that to creation. Yeah. So that was a lot on the solar plexus. I just think it's very, yeah, kind of top of mind, front and center in a lot of her experiences. And sort of thinking about the way that Finneas helps her bring that to the throat is, again, if you watch the documentary, I think that's very clear. Billie also has what we call a small split, which means she has two centers defined here, and they're connected to each other, obviously, and two centers defined down here, also connected to one another. And then in between here, there's a gap. So that's called a small split. I have one too. And Finneas actually completes that. And so it's sort of this, we're always looking for that bridge gate, for that thing that's going to help us bring everything together. And for her, in a lot of ways, Finneas is helping her connect her emotions to everything else. I'm going to stop talking about Finneas for a while now. I feel like I've gotten kind of stuck on there. Other things I wanted to talk about. Oh, so her specific solar plexus definition, this 1949, is it's called the tribal circuit. It's part of this circuitry in human design. I'm sort of trying to balance the fact that I think people watching this might not be super into human design, and so I don't want to get too technical. If my dog barks again, I'm going to take care of him too. So 1949, tribal circuitry, also known as community circuitry. Sam Zagar calls it the inner circle circuitry, which I really like too. But it's really about like my people. When I say my, I mean Billie's people. And so I think of this kind of in two ways. She's talking about my people, and she actually uses that language pretty often when she's referring to her friends and family. And when she talks about her fans, and she doesn't use the word fans, she calls those her people too, that she really feels like those are part of her family. One of the sort of keynotes of this particular channel is that the emotional wave is driven by a desire for connection, again, with the tribe, with her inner circle. And a lot of that is physical. And so your brain might go directly to like, oh, like sexuality. That's not what it is necessarily. It can totally be that too. But it's a lot to do with this sort of like platonic touch. And so that might be hugging her fans, which in an interview she shares the most kind of impactful moment she's ever had with a fan was this person she saw in a store. They made eye contact across the store, and then this person just ran at her and leapt into her arms and just like wept in her arms, and there were no words. That experience was so meaningful because it is such an expression of this like physical connection with someone who's in your inner circle. So very kind of in tune with the needs of other people, and very sensitive to that. She also, there's a lot of things in here. She also, at one point in her documentary, there is someone who is hurt or something, or maybe had too much to drink in the crowd, and she stops everything and sort of goes into mama bear mode and says, like, everyone get out of the way, this person needs help. And as soon as that dissipates, then she's like back at it. So yeah, this sort of sensitivity to needs. Looking at my list again, what else did I want to talk about? So I talked about this channel, her 1949. Let's talk about this channel now. So the 15.5 or the 515 is nicknamed the channel of rhythm. I'm not going to get too much into this, but sort of just thinking about the keynotes here of the sacral center, this sort of life force energy, and then the G or identity center, super focused on love and direction and belonging, direction in life. That she has this channel that's kind of providing direction to her life force energy, to that creativity that she has, that it's providing direction to it. There's a couple of people who talk about this channel speak about those who have it as having this sort of standout quality to them, or having an aura that's unusually large, which is really interesting. When you think about Billie, someone who very much stands out, and who has since she was very young, that's really amazing too. Okay, little note on that. I don't want this to be too long, so I'm trying to like skip through some of the things that I wanted to talk about most. The last thing that it's not the last thing, I shouldn't even say that. One of the last things. I want to talk about this unconscious sun, which is in gate 46. This is called the gate of determination. And as I was reading about this, I just was like, oh my goodness. So this is on her body side. So it's unconscious in her, but it's on the body side. So part of the physical body, sort of. And the gate of determination is all about, I mean, it's about determination. But some of the things that they write about it is, I wrote down something word for word if I can find it here. Okay, I love this. Being able to enjoy the moment and experience no matter how unpleasant it is. So being able to enjoy something for what it is, no matter if it's painful, if it's uncomfortable, if it's unpleasant. Um, and, part of this, of course, is her being a teenager. But there's a scene in the documentary where she has shin splints and she is absolutely limping in so much pain, even walking out on stage. And she picks up the mic and she says, okay, everyone, I have shin splints, and I think she threw out her neck or something like that. So everything hurts, especially when I jump, but I'm going to jump anyways. And she really fully gets herself lost in this moment, and sort of, sets aside all of these experiences of pain and discomfort and stuff like that. So there's that moment. And there's also this sort of ongoing trait that Billie has, that she loves mosh pits. And so, I mean, just to me, when you think about this, she likes physical intimacy with her people. She loves being able to get just completely lost in the moment, even if it's uncomfortable. But that's really like a mosh pit. She wants to be able to get into this expression without thinking, without having to worry, which I thought was really cool too. So we're getting again, we started big picture, and we're getting into these nitty gritty details that I think are almost more fun as I was doing this anyway. And I think that another one of the last things that I wanted to talk about are, again, into the nitty gritty details, but I think these are some of the most present. So there's two pieces that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll wrap up. Everyone in our human design, there is something called determination, which is said to kind of speak to how we best take things in. And a lot of people will just call this your digestion type, that it's just how your body digests food correctly, or most efficiently. And I think that's definitely part of it. And when we think about it sort of in a greater sense of how do we take things in, it's sort of, how do you take in information? How best do you experience life? How do you take in life? Especially with this many right-facing variables or receptive variables that she has. So hers is called high sound. And something I'll note is I have a friend with this determination style, and she's super into EDM music. High sound is not just about turning the volume up on whatever you happen to be listening to. It's really about having something with complexity to it. So having, when I think about Billie's music that she creates with Finneas, they work together so hard to make all of the vocals sound rich and have a depth to them. And the way they do that is by painstakingly recording snippets of Billie singing at different octaves, and then they layer them all together because they want this rich quality, this depth of sound. And that's very much what high sound determination is about. If you think about it in the kind of digestion thing, if you wanted to, people think about it as having music on in the background when you're learning, when you're eating, all of that stuff. And then on a food specific perspective, that people with high sound determination need a lot of complexity of flavor. And I'm just thinking back to my friend who I mentioned, who's really into EDM, that she has this she always talks about making sauces and having sweetness and savory and tangy and all the flavor things. Sour, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. But that's really high sound as well, as having everything layered and complex, all that. And one of the last thing, I think this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. So we also in human design have something called environment. And I mean, it is what it sounds like. It's the environment where we work best, where we feel most at peace, where we experience the most sort of alignment, and where everything else can work best. And to a certain extent, some of these are they seem quite literal. So for example, mountains is one of the environment styles. Does not necessarily mean that mountains people are only going to be happy in the mountains. It can often mean that, you know, there's a quality to being on a mountain, that you're sort of above things, you're getting sort of a bird's eye view, you're getting a fresh perspective, you're creating some space between you and the rest of the world. Like getting high ground, you're getting some high ground to it. And that's sort of what mountains are about. And so just as that's just an example, Billie's is not mountains. Billie's is called shores. And when we talk about shores, again, it could be a shore. She could love beaches. Hers in particular is called artificial shores. Okay, one second. So sorry. My goodness. I was almost done. Shores. So shores is not necessarily about literally being where the water meets the sand. It's being where one environment meets another environment. It's being on the edge of something, being in between, being able to have a perspective to the other side. And I just was thinking like, oh, so where am I thinking about like Billie being most at home? It's on a stage. It's a stage. It's literally a stage. A stage is a shore. You know, she's up on this sort of platform. There's an edge, and then down in the audience, of course, is all of her people, and that she's really happiest right at that edge between those two different environments. So I think I probably didn't get to everything, but I think that that's plenty. There was, I think, one more thing I was going to mention that I saved on my phone. Oh, yes. Okay. So she did an interview with Vogue recently, and the photos from Vogue have been everywhere. She's made a lot of changes in the way that she's expressing herself physically. And I mean, she's 19, don't we all? But there's this quote, and I meant to talk about this when we were talking about her defined G center or identity center, but I'm going to talk about it now. So I'm just going to read this quote. She says, "I definitely am who I am. And I try really hard not to let any thoughts of what should I look like or what should I be like, you know, because sometimes I find myself thinking about, oh, what is this person going to think? Or how should I?" And then I catch myself and I'm like, wait. I don't have to worry. I am me, and I am the only person that I need to make happy realistically. And that right there, I think, is the wisdom of the defined G center, that when we don't have that energy defined in us consistently, there's this sense that we need to be a certain way or fit into a certain thing in order to experience love and direction. And she has a defined G center. She's creating her own direction. And she doesn't need to kind of rely on approval from other people to experience that sense of love and belonging. So I am gonna stop sharing my screen. I hope this was interesting. It's been on my mind for a really long time, and I might create some grid posts to kind of break down some of the specifics of it, if that might be interesting. But this was super fun for me. I hope it gives you a sense of, you know, if you aren't into human design and don't really know what I'm talking about when I talk about it, I hope this gives you a little window into what this system is. My dog just placed a tennis ball in my hand very gently, so I think he needs some attention. Yeah, let me know what you think. What else comes up? Do you also love Billie Eilish? I've been sort of obsessed with her lately. And do you have questions about your chart? Are you curious about yours? So, bye.